the Civil War in 1975 was probably easier to understand than the Civil War in 1988. The players had changed, the regional landscape had changed, and 15 years later it's hard to tell what that war was fought for. And then Lebanon finds itself under indirect foreign rule. It's been almost 15 years since that event, 2005. Do you see a similar outcome resulting? In other words, there's no civil war since 2005. The violence has been contained when it comes to events that we're aware of, July 2006, or even the brief domestic problems here. But it's not been a civil war. But it's been 15 years of turning into something very different. Do you think Lebanon is now in its next phase of this period will lead to something that may result in, once again, indirect foreign influence?
I think everybody agrees, all political parties on both sides of the political spectrum agree that they don't want to go back to the days of the Civil War. Right. Nobody wants, a full...
Because Ain al-Rumani led to something horrible, but exactly. February 2005 didn't.
So I don't think it's different in that sense. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a confessional, or at least the confessional tensions will most probably not flare into a war.
Right.
There are confessional tensions existing still today. But what's more, I think, striking is that everybody wants, all the political parties are not resorting to weaponry to resolve these confessional tensions. Now you have here and there some flare-ups, of course, but they're much more concerned about repercussions of any flare-up on Lebanon as a country than they were back in the 70s or 80s or 90s. So it's a different mindset.
Although
that's what I hope.
What about the consequence, though, that despite there being no domestic fighting, no checkpoints on street corners, none of that, but that Lebanon is restabilizing under indirect rule once again? That, in other words, the dreams of the people that we both admire have maybe not been fulfilled.
Sure. Yeah. But we have to define who the people are. Mm-hmm. Half of the people, their dream has been fulfilled, probably. Mm.
That's
so if you cannot look at it from a 14 and 8 of March kind of division. The divisions have changed now.
Yes.
Okay. So there are people, and a big chunk of the Lebanese people, who don't see any problem with being aligned with a certain regional country, while some believe that no, this is not acceptable. So it's regional polarization, or it's not confessional per se. It's no longer confession, and that's good. That's the positive element behind what we see today. It's a different kind of, of a line that separates the two camps from each other. And for me, at least, that's a relief. At least it's no longer confessional. It's much more linked to regional and power plays being acted out in Lebanon.
And projecting further, that Lebanon's curse is that it is in a very complicated region, even in the best of times.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you're seeing what's happening now in terms of the Syrian crisis, in terms of the deal of the century, in terms of the Iranian, Russian, whatever flare-up. I mean, so many events are happening around us, this small country called Lebanon. You have a boiling region, and we're lucky that at least we have not borne the full repercussions of what is happening around us. We sort of been able to neutralize ourselves from a large part of the negative developments.
Of the internal.
Yeah.
Would you include the regional in that?
Listen, I mean, we could have been in a much worse situation.
So it's really today, as someone in your position who does have authority in Lebanon, is it more to do with keeping what's left of the state functioning than we will have a stronger, healthier state for our children and
The way
grandchildren?
I look at it is, I know that we're not in the optimal mode for the government. That we know. I mean, it would be a joke if I tell you otherwise. But the way I see it, I know that we have a huge task ahead of us. It's important to at least regain the trust of the people, which has been absent for a long time. Trust of people towards their government and the kinds of services they deliver. Having worked within the public sector domain for 30 years and seen what we could do, I won't accept to say I give up on this country. So we have to try. It's not an easy task. I know that. There's so much to do, so much challenges that we have to untangle, but at least we try. We have to project a different image, and that's what I'm trying to do.
In my subjective opinion, you are, I think, delivering on a promise many Lebanese women believed in and weren't in the position to persuade. That they believed it firmly, men too, but this was an occasion. You're the first female finance minister in this country. You're the first female minister of interior for the region. And people are applying, I hope, the respect and the judgment for your work, not for your gender, which is very positive. And I mean, it's not just about customs at the airport where you see a few women, or it's not just about the occasional, woman that you see in uniform. I think you're sending the message that everyone in this country is part of the good and the bad, and half of the population is as responsible and should be up to the task. That I know you've done that well. You've also, I think, put Tripoli back on the map. Tripoli may be a harder issue, which is quite tragic. It's harder than full emancipation and respect for women in this country. But the point I'm driving at is, even if the most decent person, given a huge portfolio, is shackled from issues that are beyond their control, do you think every phase of your career in Lebanon has been shackled because of events, because of concerns, whether they're domestic or regional, that your output is curtailed because of the environment of this country?
Yeah, sure.
Can you point to a specific accomplishment that you were able to overcome, aside from some symbolism, that you were able to say, you know what, I can outride this, I can influence, I can direct, and I'll be, for a moment, I'm stronger than all this?
There are many that I think. Listen, the Ministry of Interior, there are many portfolios that we can address that probably there will not be any contention around. Simple stuff, not simple really. For example, we're now working on issuing the unique ID for the Lebanese. Now, who would be against that? Yeah. Nobody would be against that, so we can do that. We can, for example, implement a more community-driven municipal police. Who would be against that?
Right.
Nobody would be against that. So, no, there are many examples in the ministry that changes the image, that is reform-oriented, and that is not contentious enough so that people will basically say or try to put any kind of arguments against. No, I think there are many things we can do. Not maybe the major, but certain reform projects. Definitely, there is room to do that.
Could I play devil's advocate and say that it's only the bare necessities of what's at stake that can be accomplished, like an ID or like municipal police, but the projects that would reestablish Lebanese sovereignty are perhaps not possible at this stage?
You can work on basically on the security agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
which I know you're trying to.
It's not
really,
me only. I mean, for the last 3-4 years, the security agencies within the internal security force has done a huge job.
Yes.
And nobody can say otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I think the information unit within the ISF has been able to try to stop around 30 terrorist attempts in Lebanon, and that's because for the last 6-7 years they've been supported, they've enhanced their capacities, their intelligence capacities, they've been their equipment has been very much upgraded, so they've done a wonderful job. And this is not just by my own account, by the account of in the international community. We even give intelligence information to other intelligence units abroad.
Yeah.
That's how much the ISF has improved in combating terrorism and in ensuring that the security situation today is what it is. It is much better, and we are living in a calm country.
We'll get back to security in a moment, but how about something that you experienced in your previous role as a finance minister, the economic insecurity today? This is a difficult chapter in Lebanon's history. As a former minister of finance, are you able to sort of say with maybe some perspective that there are issues that can be addressed, but they're not, and it's maybe a more policy problem than a finance issue? And what I mean here is there have been many finance ministers in this country, and there has been many economic problems in this country, but are you able to offer any solutions, having been in it and now out, having worked in the private sector and the public sector? If you were sent back to the finance ministry, is there anything you would do at this moment?
It's not what should be done, it's when and how. That's our problem in Lebanon. So we know what we need to do, and that has been basically part of it, at least, has been submitted to the international donor community, against which we got $11 billion in concessional financing and other kinds of assistance. So we know what needs to be done. We need to reduce our budget deficit. We need to implement structural reforms. We need to basically execute a capital investment program. We need to do this and that. So the roadmap has been agreed upon.
So if we put a technocrat today in the Ministry of Finance and said, okay, these are the things you need to do, would they be able to implement those?
Not as easily as one would think.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not what needs to be done. More or less the major problems, we know how to tackle them. It's when you come down to the details of who will do what, when, what is the monitoring mechanism, this should be done in what area, in what region. This is where I think the complications arise. So it's not just the Minister of Finance who's completely accountable or responsible for implementing a whole reform program or an economic plan for the government. it's basically the whole Council of Ministers. It's over and above the Council of Ministers, it's the Parliament. And
But that
that's
is-
where you have different agendas, I think, because we have to admit we haven't yet decided what Lebanon we want, economically at least. There are divergent economic ideologies within Lebanon. Some people are more, they believe in a greater role for the state. Some believe in a greater role for the private sector. That's just giving you one example. Some believe that we need to basically introduce more excises in order to protect the local economy. Others believe in more trade liberalization. So this kind of discussion, funnily, is even taking place internationally. See what
Yes.
President Trump is doing.
Yes.
So this whole rethinking of the capitalist open market kind of economy is being even rethought by some of the world leaders.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that kind of discussion also at a much lower level, but this takes place.
So
We don't have a majority and the opposition kind of setup, so it's a consensual kind of political system, and that's where I think there becomes the whole thing becomes more complicated. In the States, the majority rules and the opposition or the minority opposes. But in Lebanon, since we need to agree on everything, these divergent economic ideologies come into play, and if we don't agree, then things don't get implemented.
The makeup of the country doesn't really allow for that anyway. You're right. Consensual power sharing and all that. We have policy on one end, which is the finance ministry, and then we have law and order, which I think falls now under your portfolio. And I'm just going to tackle a few subjects that I think most people that live in Beirut see on a day-to-day basis and they ignore. It's the Minister of Interior and municipalities. And I'm curious, I've heard you say that there are basic issues you want to tackle. And this includes the traffic of not just Beirut, but the country, and the dangerous driving situation and the lack of, I think, any alternative to driving and risking your life on the highway, going north to a city we're both from. I mean, this is at times extremely dangerous. Have you seen any tangible improvements since you assumed this role? I know it's not just traffic lights, because you can put traffic lights and people won't follow them. You can put police on the highway and it doesn't matter, you'll still have reckless drivers. Have you been able to jump at this?
I've been trying to get my
car
basically
returned from the dealership?
no, my hand on what are the real problems, okay? So it's not just one or two. This is a multi-sectoral kind of problem. So take traffic, for example. So obviously, the Ministry of Interior has a role to play in terms of the at least the dimension of the traffic safety and also registration of cars.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's the Ministry of Public Works and Transportation that has to put forward a whole transportation plan.
Of course. Is there a healthy relationship between the two ministries?
To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, yes. But
and not necessarily politically healthy. I mean, just in terms of day-to-day communication and.
The first step is for the ministry, and we're talking about it today. The Ministry of Transportation has to put forward a plan. Okay, we have to really address the core problems in traffic congestion in Lebanon. And without a public transportation plan, this cannot be addressed fully, not even partially.
I had an interview recently with a fan of the train network that's of course now gone. And it's partial nostalgia, but partial reflection, because we had a sophisticated public transportation network, trains feeding into trams, a bus station that never opened to its full extent, Shar al-Halu, It's very strange to keep driving by it and see it empty and deserted. And it's a very small country that has a lot of wiggling space to build something that works here, and it's not done. But let's say minus a plan, is it something that's just unfeasible?
No, we can do small stuff, and I'm trying to do that. For example, things like getting more or having the municipal police play a much larger role in at least ensuring a smoother circulation of cars within Beirut. This is something I can do. I can ensure that all unregistered drivers come into the system.
Yes.
I can ensure that the motorcycle drivers are also not driving based on fake IDs and fake registration, whatever, permits and stuff like that. There are small stuff that could be done that could at least alleviate some of the problem. However, to address it at its core, no, you need to address the huge flow of cars that is coming from the south and from the north into a capital that is small.
Yeah.
You have thousands and thousands of cars that drive every day from the north and from the south and enter at one point in time or through a defined period to Beirut. And Beirut is not does not have the absorptive capacity for such amounts of cars.
I think there's at least 3 hours of the day in Beirut where you're better off just not, you're just waiting and wait.
So we're working, the Beirut municipality is working on a traffic flow plan for Beirut.
But is traffic safety directly under your portfolio?
Yes, it is and it's not.
And
actually,
can I just give you a subjective example? I drove down from Tripoli,
yeah.
and I think at least 3 suicide drivers drove by, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And they get away with it.
Sure.
And I know there's no one I can call, because even if I called, nothing will happen. And I say this with somebody who wants to call someone and report, but the risk of getting that person in trouble is higher than actually calling.
Sure.
And the other issue I got on the way here, got hit by a scooter. Of course, it just drives away. I'm not going to chase the scooter down with my own car. I don't think the police will even bother. And I say this, someone who wants the police to get that guy. And this is somebody with maybe I'm speaking in a place of privilege, that I can afford to fix the car, that I can let it go. But for the day-to-day traffic, the day-to-day issue, it's hell.
Of course.
What?
It is hell. Let me, first of all, there are...
And I know it's all over the place.
It's all over the place because obviously traffic safety is... as Minister of Interior, I had the Traffic Safety Commission, but the Traffic Safety Commission has to report to a ministerial committee which has many of the different ministries basically represented there. So it is public health, it is transportation, it is interior, it is education ministry, it is finance ministry, because there are different elements to traffic safety.
It's the whole Lebanese state at stake here.
Exactly. Yeah. So at least from my end, what I'm trying to do is, first of all, make sure that there's a consultative process between the interior and the NGOs who are working on traffic safety issues. And we've opened that kind of dialogue, at least to bring them on board to some of the suggestions that we can implement. Second, I've reactivated this commission, the Traffic Safety Commission, so we're now meeting. We've set up a strategy. This strategy has been presented to the Ministerial Committee and has been accepted. This strategy basically puts forward a plan, in terms of drivers' tests, which is dismal, in terms of the maintenance of the roads, in terms of...
There's no driver's test.
Exactly, in terms of traffic violations, in terms of the point system for when there is a violation of driving or whatever traffic violation, that you have a point system so that there is direct repercussion on insurance for the driver in case he accumulates a lot of points. All of these systems are not in place. So at least we have to launch the process, and that's what I've done.
Yeah.
Plus, we've done small initiatives like I've asked all the police to on Fridays and Saturdays, when the young go to the pubs, to ensure that they are being stopped and they are.
That is the only time there's traffic in Marim Khail, and I'm happy because that traffic is saving lives.
Yeah.
That's not double parking.
But we have to make sure that they're not driving under the influence, and that's why we've asked to do random sort of checkpoints, make sure that the drivers, the young people, are not driving while drunk. So we have these inhalers. So there are some things we can do, and we're trying to do that. The most important thing is to change the attitude of the people.
But that's
so
attitude.
The driver's education of when you're behind a car, you're basically driving. It could be a weapon of some sort.
You're
this is a vehicle that can kill people.
But what about attitude and also accountability? Because the psycho driver who's threatening hundreds, thousands of lives gets away with it. What does it take to get that person arrested? Because that is life-threatening.
They get arrested.
Do they though? Because there's dozens of them on the highway every night. And they're speeding past each other. It's like they're playing a video game.
So they
in
get
real life.
speeding tickets, and they pay a hefty penalty.
If they can
but
afford
that's
it.
not enough.
Yeah, they can
that's
afford
not
it.
enough. Sometimes they don't pay the hefty penalty. They try to get away with it. Sometimes they're stopped, sometimes they're not. But the penalty, the financial cost of a violation is not enough.
And it's not even just speeding. It's the way they drive. Yeah. And
It's the whole, this is, you need to, there are, by the way, the country of UAE has now, I've been told, has introduced a whole, I don't know what they call it, like a system to change the behaviors of people. Yeah. Driving is one of them. So they've instituted this program where they try to educate people about about certain things, because it is a behavioral problem, and behavioral problems have to be addressed through education. So they've designed a whole program around changing the behaviors of people, one of which would be driving. So we need to work on awareness raising. We need to basically try to influence the behaviors of people when they're driving.
It's one of those areas that I think it doesn't matter where your allegiance is and what your politics are. People, aside from these crazy drivers, all want to have a safe drive home. And I don't think this is a divisive topic. So that's the symbolic gesture. I'm going to leave security just for a bit because I want to tackle Tripoli and Tripoli's economy today. You did a lot of work there. You did focus in heavily on Tripoli. The economic situation today in Tripoli, is it healthier than it was when you left?
To a large extent, yeah. I think the situation has improved. I took office in 2015. That's when I was appointed as chairman of the Tripoli Special Economic Zone. So between 2015 and 2019, I think Tripoli has improved. Has improved in terms of more people coming, at least, because...
Does anyone go back?
What do you mean?
So the Tripoli residents, and like us, who only visit relatives and don't see ourselves reinvesting our jobs and our financial security there. Do you see Tripoli's, I would call it a diaspora, within Lebanon and outside the country, returning?
Not today.
Yeah.
Not today. We're not there yet, but I think we can be. And I see a huge potential for Tripoli, and I think the international community and the government has started to see it.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that future growth in Lebanon will come from the north, because this is still a region that has not been exploited fully. There's a lot of untapped potential, And we need to
700,000
basically leverage
yeah.
whatever resources and facilities are there. And there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of facilities that have not been leveraged fully. So I see Tripoli having a very bright future. Are we there now? Are we here today? No, we're not. But at least we're in the right direction. So from what I've seen in the last 2-3 years, more and more people are talking about Tripoli. More and more tourists are coming to Tripoli.
Yes, that is true.
More and more people from all over Lebanon are coming. They did not come before.
Right. Yeah.
Much more and more tourist facilities are opening up, shops and restaurants, but
its history is preserved, unlike other parts of Lebanon, in particular Beirut, the charm of Al-Aswaq, Jua, and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's still regarded as, as an exotic place to visit, and no other city in Lebanon has the same charm as Tripoli. However, the core problems are still there: poverty, marginalization, lack of job opportunities.
But
still there.
Would you also include Tripoli's natives who are not in Tripoli? I mean, I know too many people from Tripoli that will never return. Not because they're afraid. And I don't think it's so much fear. It's that the opportunities there don't permit a return.
So what we were trying to do was to create large or mega projects that would draw investments, because what Tripoli needs are investments.
Yeah. And Beirut has that.
Beirut has that. So we need to draw in investments, local investments, foreign direct investments, and create, job opportunities around these investments.
Yes.
And that was what the whole idea of the Tripoli Special Economic Zone was. Basically, it was to provide incentives to investments to come in. These investments would be facilities such as factories, plants, logistics services, any kind of import.
That untapped potential, which I think people
exactly.
are starving to work there.
So try to basically diversify the economy of Tripoli, which is very fragmented today, and try to build in value-added industries, drive investments, create job opportunities, and hope this will, change the whole socio-economic, conditions of the city. So it will take time, but at least I see a light.
So I'm not going to change my sigil from Tibene anytime soon.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Tibene might be the next best thing. You never know.
I'm holding you to these words.
I hope I'm still alive. I'm still around.
Well, I'll hold whoever I can to those words. The next Minister of Interior, by the way.
So you're Tibene?
I am registered in Tibene.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's Shara al-Kanayis. And I don't think there's any Knisi left on Shara al-Kanayis
I'm not
either.
sure. I cannot vouch.
Or maybe there is. Maybe there is one. The two more subjects, and I won't take more of your time. You've said it publicly that the right to nationality passed through the mother without a Lebanese partner is a right that should be respected and it should be implemented. Are we any closer to seeing that happen?
We're closer, but not there.
Not there.
I don't think we're there.
But you still firmly believe it?
I think it will come.
It will come.
It will come. I don't think this is a right even reflected in the Constitution. I mean, the equal rights between men and women. So we can dodge the situation, but for how long? Eventually, we have to get there.
Is it even written in law that it is barred for women?
No, it's not.
So this is just a practice more than a...
It's a practice because of the concern that if Lebanese women married to other nationals, that this will change the whole demographic fabric of Lebanon. And there is a fear. We cannot discount the fear. We have to basically admit that some communities in Lebanon are scared. So we have to allay their fears. but without compromising on the right of women to get the nationality. And this is where I think we need to find a compromise of some sort. I think we're there. There are, I think, 1 or 2 parliamentary blocs that have presented, project laws, and these will eventually be discussed. Now, where we'll end up being, I think it will be a hybrid of some sort. It will not be like an unconditional granting of Lebanese nationalities to children of Lebanese mothers, but at least we'll be addressing 70 or 80% of the problem.
It seems to me like women should be the decision makers when it comes to demographic fear, and not a parliamentary committee that can't agree on it for decades and decades.
Sure.
But I know that you support this, and you are working towards it. A more contentious issue. Civil marriage is a complicated subject, and I know that your own words have maybe evolved. I'm not going to say you backtracked, because I don't think you backtracked. I think you said it the way it is, which is, this is a larger debate than me. And who are you anyway to either reject or support it? I mean, you're just one person. It's not going to come down to you. All that aside, I went to a civil marriage. I should say that carefully. I went to a ceremony, which is very different. But there was not one wrong moment that I saw there. And I'll say this in the most expansive way. The politicians that showed up are not the people you would think advocates of civil marriage, but they were in the audience. The couple that got married, even if they put it on YouTube, even if they sort of gone public, they're not dangerous, if that makes sense. And putting your current role aside, do you see this issue evolving in a way that adjusts to Lebanese history, where there could be a hybrid solution, like the one you just mentioned, where it doesn't have to be black or white, where you don't necessarily have to travel abroad to get it, but if you're going to do it here, it should be done in a way that satisfies everyone, at least for the time being. You say as much as you want about this issue.
No, this is not a hybrid. This is either yes or no. Either civil marriage is allowed in Lebanon or not.
But a woman's right, you just said, is...
Yeah, that's different, because you can put certain restrictions. However, this couple can have a civil marriage ceremony, but will it be? Can it be implemented? Because there is no civil marriage law. So they can marry in front of a notary, but can I register this marriage? How will I execute this marriage really? Because there is no law that tells me what to do with this marriage. I can register, but then the registration would not have the legal basis.
Let me pick your brain. This newsworthy event in 2012, Khulud Nidal Darwish.
They did, and it was registered.
Yeah.
However...
And they did it by withdrawing their respective sect at the Ministry of Interior.
So it's withdrawing, it's not cancelling, and this is where the issue is. So you can withdraw. You can say, I want to basically not mention my religion on whatever.
Yes.
الأحوال الشخصية. But this is not annulling the religion. So when you don't annul the religion, still the whole issue of what is the legal basis for the implementation of this marriage. Okay, let me give you an example. Suppose you want to get divorced. How would they get divorced? I don't have anything. They don't have recourse to a civil marriage law that tells them that they can get divorced in front of a notary.
But what about that couple that did manage
What they ended up doing was to go back and have a religious marriage, because it was...
did they?
Yeah, they did. Like 6 or 7 of those who did the civil marriage and got registered, more than half had to resort back because the implementation day to day, for example, inheritance tax, custody,
or even maybe the children's sect at birth.
Exactly.
But does that speak more to structural problems that are?
What you need is you cannot do it halfway with the civil marriage. You have to have a civil because in the Constitution it says that all issues of personal status law is based on religious covenants.
Right, and everything else is civil. That's true. Yeah.
So if I need, as a personal status administration, I need a recourse. The only recourse I have is the religious structures. So I need a civil law. I need a civil marriage law. And the only way we can do a civil marriage law is for it to be ratified in Parliament.
Would that be something that you would?
So it's not just making a statement.
But
making a statement does not. Okay, we're making a statement, but then come implement it.
Yeah.
So I have to look at not just by making statement because everybody knows where I stand on this, but as a public sector official, I have to do more than just allowing people to make a statement. I have to make sure that their rights under the law are.
So if I understand you right, if this was a consensus reached agreement and people were on board, you'd be happy to support it. And since it's not, you're reluctant because it's not particularly your role to speak on behalf of.
It's more than that. It's not my role. I cannot allow people just to make a statement by registering one or two marriages because this is a huge statement.
Yeah.
And it's not up to me. This should be at the level of government and parliament. And second of all, as a Minister of Interior, I have to make sure that the repercussions of the registration of a marriage are addressed, and they're not addressed today.
Yes.
So I can solve one problem, but I'd be creating another one.
It is rare when a Lebanese tradition throughout history is respected, with or without the state functioning, with or without war or peace. It's the objection to civil marriage in Lebanon. There's always that argument that you take a 20-minute flight, you pay $200 round trip, you can get married this afternoon in Cyprus. And I don't know if that's really the point, but there is that case. So civil marriage is legal so long as it's not conducted on this territory. But I think, but I appreciate the way you are addressing it, which is it's a structural issue. It's not a one person or one voice. The final moment that I want to address. There's a quote that I liked from you, and I'm going to quote you to you, if you'll let me. Lebanese deserve to live in a country where they feel good, and those abroad deserve to return. That's one of the reasons we need to improve things. I do not like a defeatist attitude or people who say things like, I do not listen to the news or read newspapers anymore, or those who do not care about what's going on. After all, we are all responsible for this country. Nothing to disagree there. I am in the Ministry of Interior, speaking to the Minister of Interior. I am biting the bullet by still believing that there is still a chance for this country to move in the right direction. But you lost a friend, a colleague, and I lost a father. And I think the natural reaction to look away and never come back here is something I will not accept, which is why I still believe in this place. I didn't get the chance to have an investigation, and I don't think there was an investigation. And if there was one, I don't think it was done properly. I know you were not Minister of Interior at the time, and maybe you would say, maybe you'd have the same reaction if you were the Minister of Interior at the time. But I don't think it's necessarily it shouldn't be the person in charge. It should be a structural issue. And I remember knowing deep down, moments after it happened, that it's just going to end this way. I don't know how to match that raw pain with those words of wisdom, which is believe at all costs. And I want you to help me at least give me that lifeline where I can maybe see some of these people on trial, or maybe I can one day know the names exactly and have it not just private on the side, have it in a way that that assassination, which is the most recent one, and in my opinion, the one that shook a lot of people to their core, what do I have to believe that these people will be punished, and that I can live in a country where if I were to speak my voice, or if someone else were, a generation from now, a person wants to take the country to a better place, that they won't have the same fate, and that their murderers will get away with it, the state won't be there. On the smallest scale, it's hurting people in very different ways that they don't believe this country will help them. On the largest scale, your father is a semi-politician, an advisor, gets assassinated in downtown, and nothing happens. Help me navigate this.
Oh my God. I'm not sure I can help you navigate. This is, as you said, something that you and you alone, probably your brother and mother, can relate to and feel what goes through your head and what you're suffering from. I mean, I would have had the same kind of reaction as you have, and you're completely right. There's nothing I can say that will lessen the I don't know what's the raw pain that you have. But what is, obviously, I'm guessing that we know sort of the general side that has committed that crime, right? Can we confront them straight out? We know we don't have the abilities to do that today. We don't. The same with Saad al-Hariri. The situation is probably even worse. So the only thing that one can hope is that whatever commitment your father had towards this country, the fact that he wanted to come back, the same with Basil Flayhan, the same with Rafiq Hariri, they had this passion, this drive. Same with me. That we need to continue with what they were trying to do, so at least we can reach, the result we want to reach, and what they hope they would have.
Do you have similar reflection when you're sitting in this office? You lost 3 colleagues, and yet you are in a position of power, and as you just said, unable to take their murderers to trial or in jail. Does that ever hit you hard when you're sitting here, that all this loss happened in the last 2 decades, less in the last 15 years, and that even though you are now visible and in a position of real authority, that it's way beyond your control, and that someone like me who has no bone to pick with you can safely say, I don't think anyone in this ministry even looked at the issue. They didn't. Nothing happened.
No, I wouldn't say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they've looked or they did not look. I think even if they had known,
could not look.
Even if they knew, I don't know. Probably the bigger issue overrides.
Yeah.
The loss of your father's life, or the loss of. This is something that would require a sacrifice on the short term in order to maintain a stability of some sort. So I think this is how people look at it, that there's not much we can do. Rather than flare up things, let's try to ride it out, and hopefully by building a state, we can get where we want. I think this is the way they look at it. Does not ease your pain, I'm sure. But unfortunately, politics is dirty.
So it's state rebuilding, conflict management, and now it's survival.
Yeah, it is.
It's a shame that this is the post-Civil War era. But regardless, there is something that you said in your inaugural speech, which I loved. Buried deep and towards the end, you did say that Bas el-Flayhan and my father, Muhammad Shattah, did at least play a role in the way you approached this job. And I think it means a lot when I still hear those names referred to, because over time people do move on. And I think they are very important names to remember. And
when you talk about Rafiq Hariri, Bas el-Flayhan, Muhammad Shattah, these are people of the same mold, and they've done huge stuff, even though probably their contribution is not known to everybody. But when you hear these names, what do people say first on? These were reformists, these were people of integrity, these were people who, surpassed most of the political people today existing. I mean, so it's when you say these names, people immediately think positive stuff, and this is a legacy of some sort. You're leaving a legacy, and that's how I'd like to be remembered, frankly. Not by position, not by money, not by great things I've done, But when people say my name, they think good stuff.
They think of respect, and you're saying things, and I don't know if they're off the cuff or if they're pre-planned, but you're open at least to debating issues, and I think I'm lucky to consider you a friend. With that, thank you for your time.
Sure.
Raya El Hassan is a technocrat who has inherited authority over Lebanon's security portfolio. But even in her position, Raya can only achieve so much, especially when it comes to her own independence, or for that matter, lack of independence, regarding regional issues that override what's left of Lebanese sovereignty and oftentimes dictate the way Lebanon behaves, both internally and externally. Now, the last few episodes, we examined the Lebanese state, the structure of that state, whether it's the civil marriage debate, whether it's the sectarian system Lebanon inherited, or whether it's basic infrastructure problems that affect Lebanon. We've been looking at governance. And what about the average Lebanese citizen? Or for that matter, the Palestinian refugee, the Syrian refugee, or the domestic workers living in Lebanon? Citizens' relationship to the Lebanese state has unfortunately oftentimes been one of mistrust. And next week we'll be with Nadim Houri, who directed Human Rights Watch in Lebanon and only recently moved to Paris and now is running Arab Reform Initiative. We'll be looking at human rights abuses that affect Lebanese society, from defending minority rights to battling censorship, and plenty of challenges in between, and how the state addresses those issues, and whether or not the Lebanese state has evolved and improved since the Civil War ended. Until next week, I'm Raya El Hassan, and this is the Beirut Banyan.